Hello everyone, good morning and a very warm welcome to what will be the first of what we hope will be a series of monthly webinars for Sage 50 Cloud Payroll. Our topic today is Get Your Payroll Done. So exactly what it says, it's all about processing your payroll in the 50 Cloud software. My name's Duncan. I'll be your host and presenter today, and I am joined by some of my colleagues in the training team here at Sage who are on hand to answer some of your questions that you'll be able to submit via our Q&A option, which is located on the right-hand side of the screen. So this is what we've got lined up for you today, and this should take about an hour to get through everything. But we're going to start with a section on preparing to process. I'm going to run through a few tasks that you made it complete before you actually sit down and enter your employees' payments. We're then going to run through the payroll process. I've tried to break this down into 5 simple steps, and I'll also mention some of the additional tasks again that you might need to complete during that process. And then we're going to finish with the month-end tasks, just a couple of things you need to do at the end of each tax month. We'll explain what a tax month is and how to make sure that you're completing those tasks and reporting everything you need to HMRC. We then have a section for questions. So if you can stick around at the end of the webinar, we will remain online with you, and I'll try and pick up any final questions in that final Q&A. So let's kick off with preparing to process your payroll. And I've got a checklist for you with 4 different steps to complete. The first will be to add any new starters that have joined the business since your last payroll. The second is to enter absences that will qualify for any statutory pay. The third is to put employees not being paid on hold. And the fourth one is to check your mailbox for any tax code or student loan notifications. You can do that within the software. You don't have to go into a separate browser, and you'll be able to apply any of those changes directly to the relevant employees. So we're going to start our first demo by taking you through some of those preparation steps. What I am going to do is just switch to my other screen. And you'll see there that I'm already logged in to Sage 50 Cloud Payroll. I'm going to be running a monthly payroll in today's demo. And I have got a new starter that has joined us since our June payroll was run. And whenever you take on a new starter, they will bring with them either a P45 from their previous employer, or if they don't have a P45, you'll need to get them to fill in what used to be known as a P46, but is now known as a starter checklist. Now, there's a link to this on your handout. It's available on the gov.uk website. There's a version an employee can fill in online and print out themselves, or an easier one to use is the printable starter checklist. It's really useful for capturing employees' personal details and getting them to choose the employee statement that applies to them, and that's information you wouldn't necessarily get on a P45. And it's also handy for those that are paying back student or postgraduate loans, as it enables them to tell you what type of loan they are actually paying back. So you might want to consider getting your employees to fill in a starter checklist, even if they do have a P45, or you could create your own equivalent form, as there's a lot of useful information on there that you might not get from the P45 itself. So we've got a new starter, and they didn't have their P45, so they filled in the starter checklist, and I'm going to show you a quick way of setting up their employee record by copying some existing details of an employee that we're going to use as a template. So if you've got someone that's going to do the same role, similar role, or maybe this employee is replacing them, you can select an existing employee in your list before you create the new one. And if you go to the employee tasks here on the left-hand side, and either go into the employee wizard or the quick employee option, what you'll see is there's a message saying, do you want to base the new employee on the existing record and copy over information? And if I click yes, that will save us a bit of time, and it will help keep our records consistent for employees that are doing similar jobs. So it'll assign the same pay elements, for example, it'll put them in the same department, they'll have the same payment frequency as the employee you previously selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly fill in some details right now. So forename and surname, you need to put a couple of address lines in and UK postcode. if they have one. We'll complete the date of birth. That's a mandatory field. Anything with a star next to it is mandatory. And we can indicate if we have conducted our right to work checks. We're going to put this employee's start date in. So they've joined us on the 12th of July. We could enter the bank details if we wanted to. And then over in this section on the right-hand side, we're going to enter details of the starter form. So if you do have a P45 from the previous employer, you would fill in the details just here, including their previous pay and tax. But if you don't, just choose the option for P46 and then the starting declaration that was on the starter checklist. So in this case, it was statement B, and that will assign the appropriate tax code, so emergency tax code on a week one, month one basis in this particular case. I'm then going to complete the national insurance number, but if for some reason you don't know it, you can tick the not known checkbox. We're going to choose the NI category, which for this employee is standard rate contributions. Then going to fill in some payment information. So we're going to give this employee a fixed salary payment, a gross salary. So I'm actually going to enter that as an annual amount, £24,000 per year. And that's going to create a monthly salary for us. And then we've got the payments that were already assigned to that existing record that we've used as the template. So once you've got all the details entered, you can click onto Save and Clear. We'll get a few reminder messages about entering bank details if required. And then if we close out of this screen, another reminder to enter contracted hours, and I'll show you where to do that. We can see that our new employee is now added to the bottom of that list. And it's just a case now of checking the employee record, entering any missing information. So in this case, I'm just going to go into the salary details and fill in the contracted hours, 35 hours per week. And because we have a factored payment, that enables us to work out the hourly rate for this employee's overtime payment. So we've added a new starter. The second item in our checklist was to enter any absences that qualify for a statutory payment. So I'm going to show you a quick way of entering absence details for maternity, paternity, adoption, or sickness. And that is using the quick links available in the employee tasks. So I'm just going to select an employee who will be starting some maternity leave this month. And once you've set up the statutory payment, it will calculate automatically for the duration of that maternity leave. And then you'll see that opens up some options within the employee tasks where we can record sickness, adoption, maternity, or paternity. So I'm just going to go for the maternity option for this first demo and indicate that I've received the medical evidence and fill in the expected date of birth. And then the software will check the entitlement to make sure that the employee qualifies for the payment. And all we then need to do is to fill in the employee's last day of work so that the SMP, the statutory maternity pay, can be calculated from the following day. So this employee has worked up to the 4th of July. They're starting maternity leave on the 5th. So that's what I'm going to enter as the last day of work. And once we've filled in both of those dates, you'll see a series of key dates, including the last day of the maternity pay period, if they're taking the full entitlement, and also the statutory rates of maternity pay that will be payable over the next 39 weeks. So a really handy way of entering absence information. We've got plenty more detail on statutory payments available in our Help Centre, and it's one of those topics that we could perhaps put another webinar on specifically around statutory payments if you wanted to see that in more detail. So final tip, you can print this information. If you go through these quick entry screens, I'm just going to click Save and I'm going to click Close. And we now have some absence details and we'll see that that will automatically calculate our statutory pay. So I've got two more things on my checklist. The next one is to put any employees who are not being paid on hold. And that would refer to employees that perhaps have taken some unpaid leave, so they're not working right now, or they could be seasonal employees that you've kept on the payroll that aren't working at this particular moment. And if you do have employees that fall into that category, to put them on hold, you would just go into their employee record, you'd go onto the employment tab, and you would simply switch the status from OK to on hold. And what that will do is it will prevent them being updated automatically in a period that they're not being paid, and it'll give you the chance to inform HMRC on your next FPS that they're irregularly paid. So they're not working right now, but they haven't actually left the business. So we're keeping them on the payroll. Now, actually in this demo, I don't have anyone on hold, but I wanted to point out where to change that status. But I will show you the final step in our preparation checklist. And this is a handy hint as well. So if you do receive your tax code notifications electronically, rather than going onto a browser to log into your PAYE online account, you can retrieve those notifications directly in Sage Payroll. So all you would need to do is go to the e-submissions tasks here on the left-hand side. You would open the IR Secure Mailbox, which is the second link in the tasks. And then if it's not configured to automatically check for mail, you would click onto the new mail option here at the top. And that will then go away and check your online mailbox. And if there are any changes you need to make for tax codes, student or postgraduate loans, you'll see the details displayed in the mailbox area. You can open that notice and you can actually apply it directly to the relevant employee. So it should save you time, also help you avoid mistakes, and saves you having to log in separately in a different browser. So that is our preparation checklist. We'll give you a quick recap and then we'll start to move on and actually get this payroll done. So we've seen there we added a new starter using a starter checklist, formerly P46. You can use those quick options from the employee tasks to enter statutory absences. You put your employees on hold period and you would check your secure mailbox if they're not working this period for tax code and student loan notices. And there's a handy link to that starter checklist available in the handout that you can download right now. So we're going to keep moving on. I can see some questions are coming through, so we'll provide answers in the Q&A panel. And don't forget, I will stick around at the end to pick up your final questions and requests as well. So the next section is all around processing your payroll. So this is the steps involved in a pay run, and I've tried to simplify this by breaking it down to the 5 key steps involved in the process, which are to set your process date, to enter your employees' payments and deductions, to print pay slips and any other reports you might need, to update the records, and then to submit that information online to HMRC. Now, if you've run a payroll before, you'll know that there are additional tasks alongside these 5 key tasks. So I'm going to try and mention some of them as we go through the webinar today, time permitting, but we're going to focus on these 5 main areas. So let's now rejoin the demo. Just going to switch back to Sage Payroll. And whenever we're processing our payroll, we'll be working with the payroll tasks, which are located here on the left-hand side of the screen. So you can work your way through these tasks, running from the top down to the bottom. But another handy hint, particularly if you're new to payroll, is there is a process map that you can switch on by heading to the Change View option here at the top. If you select Payroll Process, that brings the process map up at the bottom, which you can resize like so. And we've then got the tasks we can work through left to right, including some of the extra tasks that aren't necessarily located in the Payroll Tasks pane. So before I get started, I'm going to select the employees I want to pay. So you have some selection tools to help you do this at the top. I've got a pretty simple payroll where all of my employees are paid monthly on the same date each month. So I could just select them all by clicking clear and then swap. But if you have a more complex payroll, if you have weekly and monthly, for example, or if you prefer to process different departments separately, you could make use of the outline option in the software. This option just here, which allows you to filter your employees by their pay period. So you could choose just monthly or just weekly paid employees if I had any. You can even go a level further and filter them by a particular department or cost center if you've set those up in your software. I'm actually going to stick with all employees. So as I say, mine are all paid on the same date. I'll click onto clear and swap, and we've now highlighted all of the employees that we're going to be paying on this pay date. So let's complete our first step, which is to set the process date for this payroll. The process date is reported to HMRC as the pay date, and it's the date used to determine the tax period for all calculations. So this date should be the date that the employees receive their pay. There's one exception. If the usual date your employee receives their pay falls on a non-banking day, you can still use that as the pay date in your program, but you should actually report that information to HMRC on or before the date they receive their pay, which might be the previous banking day. So I'm going to select change process date from the payroll tasks just here. My employees are paid on the last day of the month, which is the 31st of July in this case. I'm then going to click OK, which saves my process date, and I'm then ready to move on and enter my payments. Now, there are a few optional tasks that you might have spotted before we get to enter payments. There is a reset payments wizard. And if I just open that up, I'll explain what it does. It gives you a way of selectively resetting some of your payment values. So you can set values to default values as stored in the employee records. You can retain what was processed in the previous period, or you can clear them to zero. And scenarios where you might use reset payments is if you've got payments where the hours vary each time you pay your employees. You might want to clear the hours. That might be a good one to use for things like overtime. Or there could be payments where the rate changes, such as bonus payments. And again, you might consider clearing those values before you do a pay run. Now, it is entirely optional. You don't need to use the reset payments wizard. If you've got a fairly static payroll, there's probably not much point, as the payments will stay roughly the same. But this is a good way of clearing values to maybe avoid mistakes or to start with a clean slate before entering those variable payments. Now I'm actually going to move on to the Enter Payments screen, and we're going to take a quick look through each area there. And I will point out the process for dealing with both starters and leavers in your pay run. So there are a couple of things that you will need to consider. So let's just jump into the Enter Payments screen. And it'll prompt you to check for legislation updates, which I'm just going to skip for now. And this takes us into the Enter Payment screen, and you'll notice you've got some navigation options here at the top to move between employees to the first, the last, or even selecting specific employees in the list that you've selected. And another quick tip is if you need to jump into an employee record without interrupting your payroll, you can click this employee button within Enter Payments, and that takes you straight into that person's record where you can check what you need to check, make any necessary changes, and then you can come back without that interrupting your payroll. So most of the data entry will be done on the Payments tab. We've got a fixed salary, which isn't changing for this employee. We have an hourly payment, where I'm going to enter the number of hours overtime that have been worked. And the hourly rate in this case is calculated automatically, as this is our factored payment. And then bonus payments, again, can be entered as 1 unit multiplied by the amount of pay. And you'll see there's a high-level summary of your breakdown gross to net, with your tax and national insurance always shown here at the bottom of the screen. So in the other tabs, you'll see any voluntary deductions that you may have set up, attachment of earnings orders, employee loan repayments. There's an absence diary where you can quickly update sickness information for employees perhaps on continuing sick leave. And then there's a nice summary of your payments and deductions where you can check things such as pension contributions, as shown here, and student and postgraduate loans. The information tab shows all of the facts and figures involved in the calculations, and that could be printed if you needed to know that information. And there's an opportunity to make notes for an individual, which can be accessed from the history tab in their employee record, should you need to look back on them. Once you're happy with the payments you've entered for this first employee, you can click on to Save/Next. That takes you on to the next employee, and you can repeat the same steps. Now this employee, as it shows in the summary here, has a salary sacrifice. That could either be a pension, if it's a salary sacrifice pension, or in this case, if I check the deductions, they actually have a childcare voucher salary sacrifice. So that reduces their gross pay, gives them tax and national insurance relief. And if I move on to my third employee, you might remember this was the employee I selected when we took on the new starter. And the reason for that is this is our leaver. So we do need to do things slightly differently as we are processing their final payment. So as it stands at the moment, we've got a full month's salary entered. There might be additional payments we need to make. So think of overtime, bonuses, things normally paid in arrears that you might need to include in the final payment. And also holiday pay. If they've accrued holiday that hasn't been taken, that would usually need to be paid to them as part of their final payment. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the salary. They're not working the full month, so I only want to pay them for the days they've worked in July. I've actually counted up the number of working days in July and the number of days they will actually work. And I'm going to do an adjustment by adjusting the hours value. And can you see there's a little calculator icon that we can use to bring up a mini calculator? And I'm just going to enter the number of days they have worked, which is 17, divided by the number of working days in that month, 22. And that allows me to adjust the salary amount. And that is just one way that you might work out a part-month salary. You'll have your own method, I'm sure, that you'd use for starters and leavers. I just wanted to show you that little calculator, the mini calculator function in Enter Payments. So we need to think about any other final payments, and to help jog our memory and to tell us about other tasks we may need to complete, there's a checkbox to select at the bottom of the screen, indicating this is the final payment. And when you do that, you'll see any relevant messaging. So this tells me there's an outstanding attachment order. So we need to notify the court or creditor. And then it gives us some guidance that we would need to update the records to ensure tax and NI details are correct, and then process their leaver details before sending the FPS. And we're going to cover that process once we've completed our payroll and updated the records. So one more employee to look at in a bit of detail is employee 4. This employee started maternity leave this month. So because we entered the maternity details here on the summary tab, we can see the statutory maternity pay amount. And there is an option on the summary to make up to basic, which you would use if you have a company maternity pay scheme and you're looking to pay your employee their normal basic pay made up of maternity pay and basic. So the way that it works is you start by entering the full salary, which I've already done on the Payments tab. You then come to the Summary tab and click Make Up Basic. You'd click Yes to continue, and that automatically adjusts the basic pay. It's brought it down to this lower amount, meaning the employee is receiving their full basic as part of that contractual maternity pay scheme. So you can repeat that for any month where there's a specific amount you want to pay them. But if you don't have a company scheme, again, you would need to manually calculate how much salary they are due for the days they've worked in that period, if at all, and then you could reduce the salary accordingly. So I'm just going to save the payments that are already entered for my other employees. So I've got a lot of fixed salaries. And I think towards the end of this list, I've got some hourly paid employees. So for these employees, we're entering the number of hours that they've worked multiplied by the hourly rates. And finally, we have our new starter. And similar to the leaver, if they haven't worked for the full period, you'll need to manually adjust their salary amount. And I'm going to do it the same way I did before. I can use the mini calculator. I know that they will have worked 15 of the 22 days in July, and that is the pro rata salary that I'm going to give them for this month only. So those are all of my payments entered. When we close out of that screen, you will see that the last calculated column now shows our July pay date. There is a different option if you want a quick way of entering hours for hourly paid employees. So there's the timesheet entry option available as a task or in the process map. So as you can see here, it gives you a grid. Might be handy just for entering things like overtime or hours for hourly paid employees. It gives you a quick way of entering and saving those hours. And after you do the enter payments, there is a pension assessment option if you have our pensions module. We won't have time to go into that today, but there are links to further support on that in the handout. So that is the data entry complete. Let's give you a bit of a recap back on the slides of where we're up to in the process. So we started by setting the process date. This should be the date the employees will receive their pay. If the usual pay date lands on a non-banking day, you would still report that as the pay date, but you would send your submission on the earlier date that the employees are paid. And then we've entered our payments, and you've seen those optional tasks: reset payments, timesheet entry, and pension assessment if you use our pensions module. And in the handout, that will link to the further support articles giving you more information. And a quick summary of the enter payment screen. Remember, you can jump into the employee record if you need to. You've got the various tabs running across the top. You'd enter hours and rate values where applicable, and you've got that summary of the gross to net displayed at the bottom. And we use the save/next option to move us on to the next employee. Okay, so what was next in our 5-step process? We are now moving on to payslips and reports. So a few different ways you can produce payslips. They are a legal requirement. You need to provide a payslip on or before your employee's pay date. In Sage Payroll, we do encourage you to go down the digital route, either using our online payslips or perhaps email payslips secured with a password, but you can still print them either onto plain paper or onto Payslips Stationery, but do keep in mind that Payslips Stationery is no longer available direct from Sage, although there are third-party sellers that you may be able to get that stationery from. So we're going to have a look at a couple of those payslip options, and I'm also going to show you some recommended reports and a way of creating a reports pack, allowing you to create a single document with all of your payroll information in one place. So now just jumping back to the demo. So we are now at the point where we would run our pre-update reports. This is where it is in the payroll tasks, and it's also available in the process map. The first thing you see when you go into your pre-update reports are any favorites that you've added, and I would strongly recommend that you add these two, Payment Summary Part 1 and Part 2. And you would find these reports in the summary folder. Just scrolling down, they are listed automatically, and you can click the star next to the report name to add those to your favorites. So part one gives you a view of the gross to net for each employee, along with company totals. So by double clicking the report, you generate a preview, and it does pull out items such as statutory pay. And this was the attachment of earnings, a post-tax deduction. And then we've got the employee national insurance and pension, as well as their PAYE. That's the total net pay that we'll be paying out this month. And you have the part two to that report, which will give you further detail on some of the employer information. So this gives you the employer contributions for national insurance, sorry, just here, and also for pension. And it also keeps a record of tax codes and national insurance categories that have been used at the time. So as a minimum, I would recommend those two reports. If you are still looking to print your payslips, there are options available. So you would choose the laser folder if you've got a laser or inkjet printer. If you're still using dot matrix printers, we do have dot matrix layouts as well. You would choose either a layout to fit stationery if you're still using stationery, or if you are looking to print onto plain paper, I'll share a quick tip with you. If you preview the report first, I'm just going to preview it to show you what these printed payslips might look like. So you can see, if I just scroll in, zoom in, you've got all the different pay elements, hours and rates, deductions, year-to-dates, and the net pay value. But if you printed this information, it would only print the text. It wouldn't print any of the background. So you wouldn't see these boxes behind the scenes. So a quick way to get around that, and you can set the template to print in Report Designer if you wanted to save your own customized payslip. But perhaps an easier way, just to use a standard payslip, is to export your payslips before you print them and export them as a PDF. I'm just going to save them on my desktop, and I'm going to call these Payslips July. And by doing this, you then have that PDF document, and if you print from here, that will print out all of the background information, so it looks more like a payslip. And then, of course, you'll need to distribute these to your employees, either sending them out in the post or making them available in the office, which, as we know, in these times might not be as easy as it used to be. So many people working from home. So I'm going to show you an alternative to printing in just a moment's time. But while we're on the topic of reports, if I go back into my pre-update reports, I just want to show you how to create a reports pack by setting up a report selection. And this will allow you to save a single document or to print a single document containing a number of different reports. So you can find them from report selections here within the report screen. Here's one I created earlier, but to set one up from scratch, you would just click the new option. I'll just edit this one so you can see how it's been set up. So it just takes a few seconds to open. And it'll give you a list of the reports in your selection. Still waiting for that to come up on screen. Here we go, it's worth the wait. Selected reports, I've got some pay slips here, payment summaries 1 and 2. I've included a pensions report and a report to check, update records check report. And by adding reports to a selection, I'm just going to preview the report selection for you. It'll run them all at the same time. Just entering my criteria values. The preview splits them into different tabs. So we can view payslips, payment summaries, pensions report, and update records check report. But the great thing about this is if I want a PDF of all of it, I click on this little arrow next to the export option. I can export all of it as a single document. I'm just going to call it July Reports Pack. Just give that a few seconds to save. And then once it's done, if I just close out of the reports, this is my reports pack. You can see 10-page document with payslips, payment summaries, pensions report, and update records check report. Now, suffice to say, obviously this is payroll information. It's highly sensitive, so do make sure wherever you're saving these PDF documents is secure. It's only accessed by those that are authorized to view that information. Great, so we've seen some of the recommended reports and a report selection. I just want to show you the online payslips option where you can integrate Sage Payroll with Sage HR, which is our cloud-based HR system. It comes included in all of our payroll subscriptions. So you'll be able to set this up and use it without any additional charges. The setup process is explained in our help center, but again, we're looking to bring out another webinar explaining that in more detail. But for today's demo, I just want to show you how you would upload the payslips, how simple that is, how quick it is, and also how an employee would access them. So because I've already been through the setup process, I've got the option to upload online payslips. So if I click onto the upload option, that will then confirm the employees that I'm including. So I've got 10 of my employees, shows their gross and net pay values. And all I need to do then is click a button to publish those payslips. And they are immediately made available to the employees in the Sage HR online portal. Now, as the employer, you can actually view all of the payslips that you've uploaded by accessing the online services. You will need to sign in with your Sage account. So I'm just going to enter my details to sign in. And that takes you into Sage HR. And for any of the employees that you've set up, I'll just go into employee 1. You can click onto payslips and P60s. And it'll show the latest payslip in this case at the top for the 31st of July. And I can view that payslip and see the exact same view as the employee. I can save it as a PDF should I need to. Maybe the employee's having trouble accessing it. And you also, as an employer, have the option of deleting the payslips from that portal. And it's a similar experience for the employee. So just going to sign in, or I am signed in as an employee. This is the employee interface. They would just click the payslips and P60s option. What we should see top of this list, with any luck, is the same payslip. There it is, Saturday, 31st of July. They can view or download. They don't have the option of deleting, but you can also upload their P60s. And they would have access to that 24/7 in the online portal and also available from the new Sage HR app on their smartphone. So a great alternative to printing, packing, and posting payslips. And it is available as part of your payroll subscription. So quick recap then on payslips and reports before we move on to our next topic. So we saw a couple of those payslip options. Email payslips, the link in this handout takes you to all of the instructions. Basically, it sends the payslips from Microsoft Outlook, creates the emails in the drafts folder, and you send them on. And printing payslips, my tip is if you want to print onto plain paper, export it as a PDF and print the PDF itself. And we saw the recommended reports, another link to an article, and the tip for using report selections to create that single reports pack document. Right, so we are approaching the end of the payroll process, you'll be pleased to hear. Our next step is to update the records. couple of tasks you may need to complete after that, which includes processing levers. So we're going to do that in the demo. So let's switch back over to Sage 50 Payroll. Okay, so the update record step is very important. Running this saves the current period's payments to the employee's history, and it means that you can't go back into the enter payment screen to make any changes. So we've done our data entry, we've printed the reports, we've checked the payment summaries to make sure we're happy with the information. We've had a good look through the pay slips. We are now ready to complete payroll and update records. It's also the ideal time to take a backup of your payroll data. There's actually an automatic backup that takes place at the same time, but if you have your own manual backup, if anything happens to your PC, you've got the information saved at the point you've already entered and checked all the payroll information. So let's use the payroll tasks to move on to update records. Gives us another prompt to check for legislation updates, which I'm going to skip. And then a warning that we'll need to print our payslips and reports first before we continue. And I'm just going to confirm that I am happy to continue and update the records. So a backup is advisable at this point. You can take your own manual backup. Just back up the file selected by default, and if you want to, you can change the file name. You might have your own naming convention. I'm just going to call this one July pre-update backup because I'm taking it just before updating records. And if I click next and finish, that backup is now successful. It takes us into the update records wizard, confirming the number of employees we are updating. Simply click next and then finish. And we have there confirmation that our employees are updated, a message to use the lever wizard before sending a full payment submission, and also informing us that we've paid a statutory payment we can reclaim, and we'll need to complete an employer payment summary. That's part of our month-end tasks that we'll cover towards the end of the webinar. So notice now that the last updated column has updated with our July pay date, and if I try to go back and enter payments, make any changes, it's not going to let me, telling me that they've already been updated, and it's prompting me to deselect those employees. What it's also done, if we take a look in the employee record, is it has created the historical entry for that pay date, now appears in the history, and it'll be part of the year-to-date values up to month 4 in this tax year. Now, once the records are updated, if you have any levers that you've just done a final payment for, you'll need to run the lever wizard. It's crucial that you do the lever wizard at this point because you'll need to submit their information to HMRC, which will be done in the next step when you send an FPS. And actually, if you're following the process map, you'll see that process levers is a step before the full payment submission. So I'll quickly show you how it's done. I'm going to start by selecting the employee that's left. It's employee 3 in this example. And I could go straight to the process levers option from the process map. Or if I'm not using that, I can go to the employee tasks and I can then click lever. So in the lever wizard, we simply need to enter the employee's leaving date. In this case, Friday, the 23rd of July. We can then print P11 reports for our own records if required. So that gives you a breakdown by period of all of the statutory deductions and statutory payments. And the P45 is what we will need to print for our employee. So if I select P45 plain paper, because HMRC have stopped providing stationery, you'll need to print onto plain A4. You can preview the report or print it directly. I'm going to preview it just so I can show you the P45 report, and you'll get 3 pages printed out. There's part 1A, which will be kept by the employee. There's part 2 that they'll give to their new employer, along with part 3 that would be kept by the employer, and the information will be included in their full payment submission. So this one does print directly onto plain paper. You don't need to export it first. Just print it out. It prints all of the boxes, etc. And once you've got your P45, you click on to finish. We get that warning again about the outstanding attachment. So we don't need to tell the council about that. There's a council tax attachment, and you'll see that the current status is now showing leaver. And if you have quite a lot of leavers, or you want to exclude them from the employee list, you can hide them from your criteria settings. So just click on the criteria funnel from the taskbar at the top, and if you put a tick in current year leavers, that removes them from the list. So employee 3 has gone, and if we needed to view their record or bring them back for any reason, we simply remove the tick from that box, and that is the leaver back in the list. So quick recap before we move on to the final step of the payroll process. We've updated the records. We took our own backup at that point. If required, you can post the nominal link to accounts. So it's another potential webinar topic. It's a way of automatically posting payroll transactions into Sage Accounts. Run the leaver wizard to produce the P45 for anyone that is leaving. And then our final step, once we've done that, will be the full payment submission. You can see there on the slide some screenshots of the leaver wizard. The final step is to submit to HMRC. So last part of this demo, just switching back to Sage Payroll and also going back to my payroll tasks and process map, is to submit the payroll information online to HMRC. And this must be done on or before the date the employees receive their pay. And if you submit it after the pay date or the process date that you've used, you will be asked for a late submission reason. And if you have many late submissions, you are likely to receive penalties from HMRC. So we don't need to make an employee selection at this point. I'm just going to go straight into the full payment submission option. You can ignore this box. I'm only getting this because I'm in a test environment, so you won't ever see that. But what you will see is the full payment submission screen with some information about the details that will be submitted. I can click on to continue, and it will show our saved user ID and password and company details. So if you ever need to update these, you'll find them in your e-submission settings. I then click submit, and it gives a summary of the information in the submission. So we've got our liability for that pay run, £3,349. Individual liability figures for each employee. It's made up of the tax, national insurance contributions, and any student loan repayments. And you'll also see starter and leaver information is included in that submission. So if you're happy with what you're about to send, simply click submit. You'll see a progress bar move across the screen. Confirms the submission has been successful, and then there's an opportunity to print a submission log should you wish to do that, but all the details are saved in your FPS viewer, which I will show you in just a moment's time. So once the FPS has been sent, the last FPS date now displays our July pay date, and that confirms that our payroll is complete. And if you did ever need to look at the detail of an FPS you sent, here's another tip for you. Go to the e-submissions taskbar and into FPS viewer. And look for the last file, if it's the last submission that you sent. And it'll give you all the information that was included in that submission, and also the opportunity of showing additional information that was included behind the scenes. So you can tick these boxes to get visibility of everything that was in that submission, and it also gives a summary of the total liability for that particular pay date. So FPS Viewer, really handy feature. So we better press on because we've got about 10 minutes to do the month-end tasks. Let's just quickly recap the FPS. That was the information included: starters, leavers, employee details, taxable payments, and then the liability made up of tax NI and student loan needs to be submitted on or before the employee's pay date to avoid late filing penalties. Okay, so final section of the webinar is around your month-end tasks. We've got another checklist, a shorter one this time. Really only 2 tasks you need to complete in the software. So number 1 is to run your P32 report. I'm going to show you what that is in a moment. And the second task, if required, is to submit an EPS containing details of any adjustments to your liability. And the third task that we can't do for you, but still needs to be done nevertheless, is to make a payment to HMRC. So you need to make sure the amount payable is paid to HMRC on or before the relevant deadlines. Now, I just want to clarify, when we're talking about month end, we are talking about tax months. And strangely, tax months begin on the 6th of each month, as the tax year begins on the 6th of April, and they end on the 5th of the following month. So pretty straightforward for monthly. You do your payroll and then you're ready to run month end. But if you have a weekly, fortnightly or 4-weekly payroll, do keep in mind that you must complete all pay dates up to and including the 5th of the month before you run your month end tasks. So don't get caught out by doing this too early and end up underpaying HMRC. And you can download a handy tax calendar. There's a snippet of that on the slide from the link in this handout. So we're going to take a look at a P32 report for the month that we've just completed. We'll work out if we need to send an EPS. We'll just demo those 2 steps, and then we'll be back to recap and do some Q&A. So last demo is on the month-end process. And again, I'm going to return to my payroll tasks, although we're not going to use the process map, as we've pretty much completed all of those tasks. We've confirmed that we've updated 31st of July and we've sent our FPS. So to print the P32 report, we can either go into the reports option above the employee list, and I've added it to my favorites, Form P32. It's actually found in the period end folder. This one here, Form P32 Employer Payment Record. You will need to provide the tax month that you're running the report for. In this case, it's tax month 4, which is the July tax month. And if I just make that full screen, zoom in slightly, we will see itemized the income tax, student and postgraduate loans. We've got the gross national insurance, it's the employee and the employer contribution combined. And then we have some items that effectively reduce our liability, which would include any employment allowance that you're eligible to claim and statutory payments that you're eligible to recover. So it's the statutory payments that would actually trigger the need for an employer payment summary, an EPS submission. If you're claiming employment allowance, you'll do a one-off submission at the start of each tax year, and then you can continue to claim it until you've claimed the whole amount. And more information on employment allowance you will find on our help centre. And then it's this figure at the bottom of the screen, the total amount due is the amount that you will need to pay to HMRC. So this month, because we're reclaiming statutory maternity pay, we will need to send an EPS to report those reclaimed values so that they expect the correct payment amount. So again, I could export a copy as a P32, or I could print it out, export it as a PDF, or I could print it out. And once I'm happy with the figures on there, you'll actually see in your company settings on the HMRC payments tab, it populates the amount due and also keeps track of employment allowance you've claimed or apprenticeship levy that you might be paying. So that's automatically updated when you run the P32. We do need to do an EPS submission. So if I go to the e-submissions tasks, I'll find employer payment summary. So we need to send this at the end of the tax month, no later than the 19th of the following month. You state the reason you're sending an EPS, and in my case, I'm recovering maternity pay. You then confirm the tax month. It'll show you the values recovered for this tax year. So this will be a year-to-date value. CIS deduction suffered can be entered manually if they apply to you. And apprenticeship levy is also calculated automatically if that applies. I'm just going to finish the EPS wizard. That takes you into the submission. And that can be sent in just a few clicks. And that submission has now been successful. So quick recap then of those final two steps. The P32 breaks down your liability. Tax, student loan and national insurance has already been submitted as part of an FPS. It's the statutory pay recovered that would require an EPS at the end of the month, and employment allowance claims, you'll have sent an EPS at the start of the tax year. So once you've subtracted anything you can reclaim and added on any apprenticeship levy, that gives you the amount payable to HMRC. And that's just a recap of the scenarios where an EPS is required. And keep in mind that must be submitted by the 19th of the following month. Okay, so loads to pack in that session. Try to give as many hints and tips along the way as I can. And don't forget, you have got access to the slides that you can download as a PDF. And there's loads of handy links dotted around. But I also want to make you aware of a couple of other support resources available to you free of charge. The first of which is Sage U, or Sage University. It's available at sageu.com. You can create a login to access that service. You get completely free access to the e-learning and Sage certification courses. So you can even get certified after completing the e-learning. There's a direct link on this slide to the payroll learning path with all of the things around Sage 50cloud Payroll. And we also have similar courses available for 50cloud Payroll and many of our other small products. So do check that out at sageu.com or follow the direct link for the learning path on this slide. Other great source of help is our Help Center, which you can access in the program using the Help Center button or from any browser at sage.co.uk/help. You can search our knowledge base and check the trending topics. Got a couple of how-to guides, you can watch videos, you can access the Sage U training, and various ways to get in touch with our support team, including our excellent Sage Q&A live session, which runs Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, where you can drop in and get an answer in seconds or minutes, if not seconds, I think we say. So you get a quick answer basically through our Q&A live sessions. So I just want to finish by thank you all for attending today's webinar this morning. I hope you found it useful. Thanks so much for your time. Do stay safe out there, and look forward to seeing you at another webinar soon.